Let's go!
Well, good morning, everyone. Special episode today. We got Toronto's finest Ron Chhinzer in the house. Chhinzer. And I messed it up. This is the fourth take. You guys didn't catch it. But Mike, who is Ron Chhinzer?
Ron Chhinzer is an incredible individual. He's a police officer. And whether you like cops or not, is besides the point. This guy is he's not a nice guy, he's a good man.
Yes.
You know, what he's doing is he's actually part of the Guns and Gang squad. You might think that means he's about just policing and just dealing with problems. This guy gets inside and he's all about people. And he's about trying to identify the indicators in youth from the age of 3 and up to see like who might fall into the pitfalls of gang life. And to work with everything from businesses to government to kind of everything, top to bottom. He's building an incredible web with a massive effort by the Toronto Police to change kids' lives. And man, you can only admire someone who will go directly into the problems of gangs, you know, head first.
Very boldly. And for anyone listening, whether you're a parent and you have kids, or you're someone that's a gang member and you're listening to this,
exactly.
This will change you, or at least start the process of that.
Yeah, amazing. Like, we only scratched the surface. Ron has such substance. He's like about so much. He stands up for so much. He's totally such a passionate guy that he knows, I guess, what he's about, that we have to have this guy back.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, enjoy this episode, but definitely there's going to be more to come with Ron.
Let's go. Next, on Standing in the Six.
Let's go.
Let's go.
I love your segue.
Straight out of the T-Dot.
That's what it is.
Live from the 6 boroughs.
Don't go nowhere.
For sure. Welcome to Standing in the 6 with your hosts Michael and Constantine.
Well, good morning, everyone, on this wonderful Monday morning. Very excited here today because we have Ron Chhinzer, who is a detective constable, Toronto Police, in the Integrated Gang Prevention Task Force.
That's it.
Thanks for coming down, man.
No, thank you for having me, guys.
I mean, and one of the first thing that I asked you was the pronunciation of your last name, Chhinzer. I've been trying to find out, even talking to you for a couple of minutes, what is the origin of your name?
You know what? So the origin is actually, it's a Sikh last name. It's from Punjab. But the actual origin for itself, I have no idea. I asked my parents, my dad has no idea. We were joking before saying my dad probably stuttered at the border.
Right.
That's where the double H is coming
Right.
into play. Dude, that's been my life story, man. Every time somebody calls me, I got to correct them double H. But realistically, I don't know. I did find an old school Sikh teacher.
Yes.
Who I asked him, and he's like, you know where your last name comes from? And I'm like, no. And he had to break it down, and he said if it's pronounced a different way. So Chhinzer is how we pronounce it. That's how I've only known it. But he said if you pronounce it Ginger,
Okay.
Punjabi,
Yes.
it kind of gets translated back to wrestler. So he
Yeah.
said somebody in your family must have been a wrestler like generations ago, and that's where the name came from.
I mean, you have the frame of a wrestler, right?
Thank you. I got the frame of a model. No, I don't.
It's funny you mentioned Punjabi because I would have not guessed that.
You know what? People don't guess it, man.
I would have maybe Guyanese. I would probably think of something like that.
Look, I apologize. We jumped in really quick.
Yes.
Not all the cameras are set properly.
Okay. Well, Mike,
Got bumped.
that's fine. We can still continue the conversation.
Well, that's all good, man.
Mike has a Madonna complex where he has to have everything looking directly at him.
You know what? I appreciate that, man. Because believe it or not, not believe it or not, but I'm the exact same way with certain things. And sometimes I try to talk myself out of it to be like, relax, not everything needs to be perfect.
Yes.
But that bothers me even more.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, then I gotta be like, it's gotta be certain things I gotta be bang on with it. Other things I'm okay with just
Nice.
I can let it slide.
Nice.
So I appreciate it, Mike.
So I know we said when we were talking in the green room, you mentioned about more or less where you grew up from, and kind of all falling into where you are right now.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Toronto.
Okay.
And then at a young age, my parents moved out and they moved to Brampton.
Okay.
Right? And when I was in Brampton growing up, so I'm one of 4 kids.
Yeah.
Both my parents immigrated here to Canada from India.
Okay.
And when they immigrated here, my mom was a teacher back home in India, but my dad had no education.
Okay.
Like grade 10 education. He lied about his age. He joined the army. He was fighting in Kashmir and Pakistan and India and killed a whole bunch of people. Never talked about it except for once when he got drunk.
Okay.
And then he kind of told me a little bit about it. And
Yeah.
I remember from that conversation, he had said something that kind of it still sticks with me today, and we all have those impactful moments. And what he had said was, you know, he was in the military. He was a tank commander. They're bombing people, and they'd have to go through to collect POWs. And he said when he got out there, he had met my mom. So they're not a traditional arranged marriage, believe it or not. They were kind of a love marriage back in the day, which was a big deal. My dad said he'd gone in there and he remembers going to war with people he didn't know anything about, but he just hated them. And it wasn't until he actually had to step foot in that battlefield and start to see the wounded people and the mothers and the kids of another country that he had no connection to, that he really started to have the impact of, these are just people like me. So he actually left. He went as a MIA. Took off. Him and my mom immigrated to Canada. They had us, and they came down with a couple friends. So anyways, with that, grew up in Brampton, and my parents growing up were not really big risk takers, but took enough risks that we ended up going bankrupt in grade 3. And then that really impacted my upbringing growing up.
Oh, what happened?
So you think about it, right? You have some stability in your life. My parents got into some bad investments. Kind of got caught up by chasing the bottom dollar, I guess. I can't speak 100% for them because I wasn't there. But they get in all these investments. They end up losing everything. Got to go bankrupt. Lose everything. And when you're brand new to a country, right, and they'd been here for maybe 15, 20 years at the time, or about then, and you lose everything you had and you came here with nothing, you're stuck. Right? You're going through, now I was moving from house to house to house and just renting houses and trying to figure it out. And there's 6 of us in the family. And my parents were always like, listen, we never came to this country for you guys to school around. So school, you got to be going. And they had 2 rules with us. And it was, if school called or you came home in handcuffs, you're going home in an ambulance. So that's kind of the way it went. So
I like that.
We bounced around, moved around. And in those spots, when you go, you're moving around, you're not necessarily in the best area all the time. So I was at a real influential age from like grade 3 to grade 9. And then we were bouncing around. And I made friends everywhere I went. But most of the friends I made were not the ideal friends you can have upbringing. My parents didn't like them, right? They were coming from broken homes. A lot of them were heavily gang involved, but
this was all still in Brampton.
Still in Brampton, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. I was in different parts of Brampton, all over.
Okay.
And I kind of stayed out of trouble for most part. But my really close friends growing up, now looking back, and what I mean by now is taking in my police experience and the amount of time I put into research and education and the gang space. These guys tell the story. I just didn't realize it at the time. And it wasn't until the last 2 years that it really sunk in, like, oh, this is what happened. So anyways, I move around, I make some friends. I have a group of 4 friends that were part of one gang but we didn't even know it was a gang at the time.
Right.
Like, they would just say, this is the name of the crew. And then you go to the garage and they'd have the crew tag in there and they'd all go partying and we just thought it was the crew.
Right.
And then as we got older, I actually had a best friend growing up. And we didn't like each other in grade 6. So this is how far back it goes. And then in grade 9, we were the only 2 Indian guys at the time playing football, so we became really close friends. And we stayed best friends all the way up. Well, when he turned 18, he got charged with a criminal offense. So he had a younger brother. And you'd mentioned at the beginning, right, people don't know what I am. And that's kind of cool, but it also backfires because I've heard every racist comment you could think of, right? So I've been called the N-word, I've been called the P-word, I've been called every, after 9/11, I got called all those things. You get Hispanics, you get all of it. But I just laugh at it because it's so stupid. It's ignorant on their part. So anyways, me and my best friend going up, he gets charged because some stuff happened with his younger brother and he ended up trying to go defend him, but we were 18 at the time. So now it's on his adult record.
Yeah.
And as we got older, like, we didn't do perfect things, but I started to realize, you know what, I really enjoy helping people. I had some coaches as well as family that was involved in police, and I really liked how they carried themselves. And, being an athlete growing up, which is, I think, not everybody, but for me it was a big thing, I really admired how they operated in terms of how they spoke, how committed they were to it, how well maintained they were. They were always in shape, so I looked up to them. So I thought, you know what, I really want to help people, but this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to try to pursue getting into policing. Well, I got rejected like 3 or 4 times over the course of like 3 years. It wasn't easy.
And you always applied to Toronto, or did you go to like Peel and stuff?
No, I applied to Peel 2 or 3 times. Okay. I got rejected. And Toronto, and this is where I'll give Toronto Police a lot of credit, what I felt was Toronto was looking for every reason to hire me. Right? And I don't want to say anything bad about Peel. I don't know.
Yes.
The other part to that, too, is I wasn't perfect growing up, so I had to show that I was not who I was.
Right.
Or who I was associated to. And that's kind of part of the process. So you can make a mistake today, but you got to show what you did after that to say, no, man, that's not me. You can say it, but anybody can say words. You got to prove it.
Right.
So I got really involved in volunteering and straightening up my act and really shrinking my circle of friends. And when I did that, I was straight up with the guys, right, with the homies. I was like, listen, I kind of want this in my life. I don't want what you want. It's not part of the equation for me. And they were cool about it. I had never had one issue. To this day, I still talk to those guys. I still don't have an issue with them. So they were cool about it. We kind of organically separated. My homeboy, best friend growing up, who had the criminal charge on him, he couldn't get hired. He just couldn't get over it. it wasn't just that. He was also starting to get more involved into some bad things.
Right.
So what happens is one day I get hired, and as I get hired by Toronto Police, he doesn't, and we just take separate paths. And as we take separate paths, I get into the policing world, and I don't know what he got into, but you hear stuff, right? You hear stuff from your homeboys. He's doing X, Y, and Z and all these other things, and we'd become estranged because he started operating on the opposite realm that I was operating. So now I'm on law enforcement, and this guy potentially was on
The other side.
the other side of the game.
This literally sounds like The Departed.
Dude, I'm telling you, 100%. This is what happens, right?
Wow.
So we still would see each other at events because we still got mutual friends. So whatever, right? And we were literally best friends, like inseparable. We had every job together up until policing. And my daughter's born, my firstborn. He pops by the house out of nowhere. He drops off a bottle of alcohol. He says, "Congratulations." That was it. Takes off. And then I seen him in and around. I'd hear stuff here and there, but I want nothing to do with it.
Wow.
So what happens is I do my policing career, right? And I get in and I get put on the west end of the city. And I got super lucky, man. I had the right people around me at the right times. And what I mean by that is, you know, sometimes we get into a place, and this is for any work environment, and you get in there and you see all these things. You have these visions of, this is my role here. This is what I can do. I can do this better than somebody else. But it really takes sometimes champions to see that in you and say, you know what, man, Constantine, Mike, these guys got something. I have to use my empowerment at this stage to really leverage them and put them in positions where they can maximize themselves. I had people like that around me, fortunately, and they helped me move. So I moved and I did all these cool stuff in Toronto Police. I did a lot of community stuff at the beginning. I was a school officer, one of the first 28 in the city in 2008, 2009. I was in the West End. I'd worked in our Criminal Investigative Bureau, our community mobilization unit, which was like all the community stuff for the entire city. And then I worked in our divisional policing, which is kind of the same thing. And then I'd gone down to downtown, and I'd worked in a major crime unit on the vice side, which is like drugs, robbery, break and enters, all that stuff. And then I went to guns and gangs.
Wow.
And when I went to guns and gangs, I was on a street team, which is like a gun and gang task force. So that's like the movie. So that's where you have a team of 5 or 6 people. There's a mix of guys and girls, and it's all informant based for the most part. And people tell you, oh, this guy's got a gun, that guy's got a gun. And then you go and you do your investigation, and you find these people. So we'd find these people all the time, and we'd arrest them. Well, I did that for 2 years. But at the same time, as cool as work was going for me, I got a family at home, right? I have kids at home. I got my wife at home, and I started to become really absent because it wasn't like criminals or those type of people operate Monday to Friday, 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Yo, it's all night, all the time. You gotta work. You have to. Sometimes you're doing surveillance from one end of the city to the other. Sometimes going to other cities. It becomes a massive operation. Sorry. So I remember I had one conversation with my son, and this was the big eye opener for me. He had failed swimming, and my son is like me, like he doesn't like to lose.
Yeah.
So it was a big moment for him. And I remember my wife said, "Listen, man, you have to take this guy to his swimming. It's not going to be good. He's going to fail. So you got to break it to him." So on the whole car ride there, I'm kind of pumping him up. And I'm trying to set him up to say, "Listen, kiddo, you failed today, not a big deal. You know, my big motto with my kids and all the teams I coach is, listen, man, when we win, but when we lose, we learn." Right? So I pass it off to him. I'm like, "Listen,
So that's a recurring theme for us on this show.
that's life, man. That's the way it goes."
Yeah.
So I tell him, we go out there, and he fails. Right? He's crying on the way home. "Daddy, I don't want to swim. I don't want to do anything." So I realized, man, I was only at his first swimming lesson and his last one. So I had to be like, what if I'm there every day? And he's like, "Okay, I'll do it if you're there." So I went back to the office, and I told him, "Listen, I'm done. I'm going to commit. I'm going to go right back to the street. I'm going to wait for something to pop up that's more conducive to family life." Even though I loved working there, it was cool, it was fun. You have big impact because you're taking guns and dope off of the street. Anyways, all that happens. I get back, and then 6 months later, I get a phone call, and it's my boss now, Jason Kondo is his name, and he calls me up and he says, "Listen, the deputy chief, Jim Raymer, one of our 4 deputy chiefs, wants to have a gang exit strategy in the city." So he said, for years, we go out and we arrest all these gang members, and we do a great job at it. Hundreds of guns, if not thousands of guns, millions of dollars, you know, hundreds of kilos of dope. We're catching murderers, sex traffickers, you name it, we're getting these people. The problem is, what do we do now once we have them in? So we really wanted to, that deputy chief Raymer had a vision of, well, now we want to have a gang exit strategy where we get these gang members and we get them out of gangs. So I said, man, 100% I'm in. That's something as soon as I heard it, I'm like, yeah, this is the next step for me. Like, this is what I want to do. And there's a kind of a side issue to that where, and this might resonate with some other people here, is when I first got into policing, I always felt a pressure to be at certain places and to do certain things, right? You say, I want to work in this unit, I want to work in that squad, and if it goes to the office place, you say, I want to work in this department, I want to make this manager level, I want to be, I want to take over the digital side of whatever. Well, within my first 10 years, I had done everything that I wanted to do. And when I had walked away from Guns and Gangs the first time, I had found this like immense relief of pressure that I put on myself. And for the first time, I was saying no to things, right? So I'd get phone calls. Well, with this was a complete choice for me. So I said, 100% I'm in. So I wanted to do it. So I had a different perspective coming in.
Right.
That was in December of 2016. We had no strategy, no anything like that. So December of 2016, I get brought in to help get guys out of gangs to figure out how do we actually do this? Is this doable? And in January, my best friend growing up, I get a phone call, and it's from a girl that we grew up with, and she says, hey, man, have you heard what happened to him? Like, what are you talking about, man? She's like, listen, he's dead. And I go, what do you mean he's dead? And she goes, he got caught dismembering a body, or discarding a dismembered body up in northern Ontario, and he got arrested for it shortly after, and then he hung himself in jail.
Ooh.
Right, so that took me for a... Right, I sunk pretty hard.
This is the same guy that you grew up with. That
Yep.
He went that one way, he went the other.
Yep.
What age was that happened?
35.
Jeez.
So
man.
35. But so that confirmed kind of some of the stuff that I'd heard.
Right.
So he kills himself. I get a phone call from the police agency that's investigating it because somebody had said, hey, call me. So these guys known each other since we're kids because people didn't know we had separated.
Right.
We kept that under wraps. Like that was nobody's business but ours. So there was a handful of people that knew we didn't talk at all, but we didn't want to create the drama between anything, so we just left it out. So somebody had said, "Hey, call Ron." So when they call me, I'm like, "Listen, I don't know what to tell you. I don't even. Everything I heard was like fifth hand, but the fact that this is kind of what happened is sad." So I go to the funeral, and when I go to the funeral, I reconnect with everybody, right? All those homeboys that I knew growing up, and this is again in January of 2017. So 2016, they say, figure out how to get guys out of gangs. January 2017, I go to his funeral. I see everybody else, and now some of them appeared to be, and I don't know, but some of them look like they're OGs now, right? OGs are just original gangsters. Like
Right.
they're beyond street level stuff. You can't touch these guys.
Yeah.
From what I don't know,
Yeah.
I'm just speculating here.
Right.
But I've known them since I was like 7 years old. So I'm asking them now. Now I'm like motivated. I'm like, what happened? Like somebody's got to tell me what's
But
happened.
nobody
Like,
wants to talk now.
like I'm a cop. You got to tell me. I want to find out what happened, and
Right.
Yeah.
I want to know. And I was real personally invested into it, and nobody said anything, and they just said, listen, it is what it is. And legitimately, some of the guys said, we have no idea, and I have no idea what happened. But for me, I went through a bit of a down moment in my life because of that, because you reconnect, right? And you always take some sort of personal responsibility. So I look back to when we were in our late teens and early 20s, and I act like it was 100% amicable. It wasn't. There was a lot of tension. There was a lot of fighting back and forth between me and him of saying, you should have done this, you shouldn't have done that. He had done prior to becoming a police officer, he had done some bad things to me, and I had done some bad things to him. And when I'd found out all that happened, you forget. You totally don't remember the 10 years or 15 years of in between where, we kind of separate. You just look back at the good times.
It's selective. It's selective.
It is selective. So
Let me ask you this.
Yeah,
So
man.
I grew up in Flemington Park.
Yeah.
Okay, and you mentioned something about you're in the gang unit. Okay, but you also walk in with a different level of confidence because you kind of grew up in that area of exposure. Okay?
yeah, it's not new to me.
It's not new, and it's the same for myself and Mike as well. And at the end of the day, people I think are almost naive to what's out there, right? I was saying this before you got in here. If you were to say to people like, there's these gangs that exist, some of them might be like, what do you mean there's a gang? There's gangs? Like they just don't understand, right?
Yeah.
They think of Hell's Angels as the plateau of what a gang should be, but generally as a functioning movement, they don't think of anything on that end, right? So they don't have that awareness.
Yeah.
However, the other side of the coin is that if you do know who these people are, there's also a level of how you interact with them, right? That basically wins respect over and how you're encountering them. Let me ask you this, just from that picture.
Yeah.
In the city of Toronto, how bad is our gang problem?
See, that's tough to answer because that would be subjective. I can't give you an objective answer to that.
Right.
What I'll tell you is the fact that there is one gang,
Yes.
that's enough of a problem for me.
Right.
To say something needs to be done with it, right?
Right.
And you look at a gang, and you mentioned a gang problem.
Right.
Well, there's so many different things to it, and I'll give it to you in kind of a weird example is one of the first things we had when it came down to getting gang members out of gang is we had a bit of a think tank. And it was, well, how do we identify a gang member?
Okay.
First off, how do we do that as a government organization without even entering the realm of profiling?
Because that was going to be a question I was going to ask is, what do you define as a gang member?
Yeah, and I'll tell you. So the first thing we had to do is figure out how do we do this. So naturally, being completely green to new initiatives and growing new projects and not knowing that, I found all of the respectable police officers that I knew were, real level-headed, real educated, real experienced. And I said, okay, I have to find gang members to get them out of gangs. Describe them to me. Where do I start?
Yeah.
And we all had the same kind of descriptions, right? And I realized, man, it can't be that simple. And the more we talked through it, we said, all right, we need to find an objective base to identify these guys that's real academic. Like there's some part we're missing. So we found in 2007, Public Safety Canada did this publication called Youth Gang Risk Factors. And there's 36 risk factors broken down into 5 categories. And those 5 categories are family, your community, your peer group, your individual characteristics, and the last one is school, right? And it's in that. And in there you have a mix of 36 risk factors. Well, there's literally a checkbox, and the more of those you check off, the more likely you are to become a gang member. And that came from research in the field that looked at gang members from all over the world and said, what are the similarities here among all of them? And none of them have to do with race. None of them have to do with sex. So what it comes down to is social and psychological issues. Mm-hmm. So it's things like, social disorganization, which roughly speaking is like a term from the 1940s. It's an idea that location matters. It's just as much as the individual, sometimes if not more.
Right.
So the physical structure of an environment, how the community interacts, might breed crime, might breed gangs.
I mean, how often you can have a gang in the suburbs?
You have them.
Right.
You have them.
Right.
They're not what we think is a gang member. So in Toronto, when we think of gang members, I'll ask you guys, describe to me a gang member, right? Or something that you would think is a gang member.
I mean, to me, if the most simplistic, just growing up, is someone that follows bad, from the most simplistic terms, right?
Yeah.
When I was young, I didn't click with people in high school. So starting in grade 9, I did not click. So I ended up gravitating towards people that were bad, that would steal, that would fight, and that is who I gravitated towards. Would we be called a gang? I mean, if I'm looking at it to this day, I'd say probably the answer is no. I would just say it is a bad kid. But does the not the media, but the society view you as a gang member when you do that, right?
I'll ask you, what do you think?
I would say yes.
What about yourself?
Yeah, I'd say yes for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I same for myself. I was never officially in a gang, but I knew a lot of gang members kind of across the city. Was friendly with a lot of them.
Of course.
Leveraged when I needed,
in
a sense. But for me, it's interesting when I hear all of this. Identity is huge. It's when you ask, what does people think about? Are they a gang member? I think what's even more important is the question is what does that individual think about themselves?
Yep.
Okay, and for me, the only reason why I didn't, I've always been someone who I guess went upstream, didn't follow the crowd. If I got swallowed into the gang life, it would have been another reason why I wouldn't be alive today, guaranteed, because I was all in for everything I did. So if I was in, I was in, okay? And I would have took it to the highest degree. Guaranteed I wouldn't even have made the age of 17, 18. Guaranteed.
And
okay?
I'll tell you, you're probably right because of how, look at the camera setup.
Yeah.
You're all in.
Yeah, I'm exactly.
Yeah. You're all in.
Yeah, I don't do anything in part.
Yeah.
So, and that means I was not a starter, but I always finished. And I have my own story. We're not here to hear that, but I say this. I know concretely the one reason why that life didn't swallow me up was because I had an alternate identity. I was a basketball player. That's the only reason. And I remember distinctly being with a bunch of guys late at night that were deciding to go to a part of town to do something that was for their gang specifically. And they knew my skill set. I was a disruptor, okay, an agitator. There's other words that you can use, okay? But they would always be like, Mike, can you come and help us? Because they had to push their weight around. And no joke, I remember a number of times I was like, do I want to do that? I want to play basketball. Like, no joke. And I was like, it's okay, man, I'll pass this time. Mm-hmm. And I literally, a couple of those times, those guys either got stabbed that night or shot or got arrested or started the course of something where they were in hiding for months, okay? And I was going to the YMCA or Mid-Scarborough to play hoops. And I remember thinking, like, I just didn't step on the train. It was like I had all the access to it. I was an asset to that world, but I know specifically only because people knew me as a basketball player, and I enjoyed that. That's the only reason why I was not in that life.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only reason.
Yeah.
Like literally, you know. And what you were saying earlier, if at any point someone said to me, you said, you know, I guess you had the right people at the right time in your life.
I did.
That it kept you from jumping on the train. Okay. I didn't, and I think the irony is I actually I have kind of like two lives up until the age of 20 and then 20 on, and who I was up until 20. I always say I know this, that if at any point I'll even be this specific. If an older gentleman at any point took the time to work past the fear that I tried to basically instill in other people, if they were not afraid and actually said, no matter what you do to me, I'm not going to go. I'm committed to you. I'm going to help you. It would have changed my life.
Yeah,
at any moment. Okay.
So we call that a protective factor.
Okay.
Right. So that's because we have the risk factors.
Yeah.
The thing is, what's the opposite to it? It's a protective factor. So it's totally in line with what you say. And here, I want to hear your input as well, because coming from where you're coming, if I'm off about something, I need to hear it, right? I need to hear a different perspective to be like, no, man, you're off, or that's not the way it is, because this is part of like the education component for us. You know, me coming out here, education is massive for us, but it's a two-way street for us.
Right.
I got to hear it as much as I give it.
Right.
I got to know where are the gaps, right, in knowledge and figure it out to come up with a solution.
No, for
So,
sure.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. The emphasis, look, I work, so kind of my story from 20, when my life changed, I ended up going back into all these neighborhoods as a youth worker. It was kind of a real grassroots organization called Urban Promise. That's what I was telling you about. The first neighborhood I was in was Alexandra Park, first government housing neighborhood in Toronto. Okay, and I remember being there now on a whole other side. What was amazing about this experience was this grassroots organization was not about programs. So I'll say this. What I can say about being on both sides, programs do nothing, okay? Because programs are run by people. And the mistake is that the people put emphasis and they major on the program, thinking the program is going to help these kids or going to do something or make change, affect change. It's all people.
I agree with you.
It's all people. And I think some people, although they start out, they're the forefront, and then it starts to grow. And then they form think tanks and committees and organizational groups and support. And then they might even get like a sponsor for that barbecue or that community cleanup. And then at some point, the people start to literally fade away, and it starts to be about the program.
Yeah.
And that's when you see it's not effective. People are very smart. I was smart enough to know that when that guidance counselor was saying to me, I remember this distinctly. I was 16, and a guidance counselor said to me, he said, "What motivates you?" Okay. And I had this like life coach book in front of me. It was like a textbook. I took it and I whipped it right beside his head. I used to play baseball, so I have good aim. Mm-hmm. And I whipped it, and it hit the wall beside him, and just boom, like this, hit the wall. And he looked at me, and he almost like teared up and said, "Get out of my office."
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Like,
That's
the true story. And I was like, yeah, exactly, because he doesn't care. I was his project, and that's what I'm saying. I was his project, and he had a program that he was responsible for. He didn't care about me as a person, so I couldn't care less about what he had to say. And that's what I mean. That whatever initiative it is, even if it's in the form of a program, the people, it's all about the people. It has to be literally like, look, how can I help you?
It's got to be effective communication.
Exactly.
And relationship building.
Right.
Exactly.
Right? So let's go back a little, and I'll kind of frame it, because everything you said, we have something kind of totally in line with what you said. So, for example, okay, let's go with what is a gang, right? Research, not our opinion. Research as a gang is 3 or more people that are together to conspire to commit a criminal offense for the purpose of generating a profit, something tangible, right? You want some money or something out of it. That's kind of what a gang is. So that's it.
Yeah, there's a takeaway, some spoils.
Always, right?
Yeah.
And the other part of that, too, is gangs, historically, on academic records as well as in our experience, they get formed for 3 reasons. One is to control an area, to traffic and illicit drugs, and to collect debt. All right, so kind of we know what a gang is. We kind of know what makes up a gang. We kind of know now the risk factors to how do kids become gang members. And now it became, what do we do, right? And how do we do it? And so I had that gang risk factor sheet. We made one up as a pilot to say how many of these risk factors apply. When I did it, I was like 24 out of 36. Right, so I scored high. So the question then became, and when I gave it to other cops, some of them scored really high. And then the question became after that, well, if we scored high, what separated us?
Right.
Why are
Good
we
question,
not?
yeah.
Why are we not on that line? And this is where policing this is where I get a little bit more philosophical with it, because you have to take a real mindful approach to these things, because it's people we're dealing with.
Absolutely.
It's not a gang. It's individual people that we're dealing with that we have to find their motivation. So how do we find their motivation? It's what we had found was, all right, I had all these risk factors, but I had protective factors. I had coaches and I had teachers that had instilled some wisdom in me, in my life, that guided me in the right direction, as well as some friends, which I didn't value until I was in my 30s. Like, I'm 37 now, but the only reason I know they were valuable is because I still remember them to this day like they're crystal clear. So that's where I had that bump. My best friend growing up, he never had that bump, man. He never had that. He was always low-key doing his thing all the time. So he never was in people's things. For me, I was a good student at school, man. I was very respectful to my teachers. I never caused problems. I wasn't what you'd consider that type of guy. But I was, when school wasn't around, I'm living there, man. It's different. It's not the same, right? You're bouncing all over the place. You got these friends. You're doing what they do. And with those protective factors, it became, all right, cool. Well, how do we do that? So the more we got out to gang members and we started really trying to find these kids, what we ended up doing is we spent 6 months educating over 2,000 frontline Toronto cops on these are the things to look out for. Look out for these things, and they pop up at different ages. So, for example, I'll paint a story for you, a picture of a kid that ends up being a violent gang member, and you tell me if any part of it makes no sense to you. So I want you to imagine a 3-year-old kid who has severe conduct problems. I'm talking severe. I'm not talking they pick their nose. I'm talking this is the bad, like, you can't even control this kid. The mom throws their hands up in the air and says, I don't know what's up. Now, that kid is one of 5 kids, and that's the middle kid. All right, and that's the age of 3, when it's the family risk factor category. The only way they get attention from their mom is when they're doing something bad.
Yes.
Right? And anybody here who's parents, do you have kids? You have kids?
Oh,
Yeah, 3 kids.
So
2 kids.
with your kids, right, if you're at home washing the dishes and you hear making noise, they're okay. What happens when it's quiet?
Yeah, exactly.
You
Right.
do your ninja sneak to make sure everything's good, right? And you catch them doing something,
right.
and you go, I caught you, don't
Yeah.
do that garbage anymore.
Yeah.
Well, with this kid, potentially that's the same situation, right? So he goes off and he realizes, listen, when I'm quiet and I'm doing these naughty things, mom comes and gives me attention. Mom's got 4 other kids to deal with,
Wow.
right? Pops isn't around. Mom's hustling, doing her thing. She has no energy or time to mother these kids the way things got to go. Now, that 3-year-old has that behavior and already has that firing and wiring in the brain of, when I do bad things, I get attention. Now they're 6 years old. They're in kindergarten. They're in the school environment, which is the school risk factors. What type of behavior is that kid going to have when it comes down to getting attention? Who's the replacement for mom in school? It's a teacher.
Yeah.
So now you have those kids where if I look back in grade, kindergarten for me, I still remember the 1 or 2 kids in the classroom like, yo, stay away from that guy. He's wild. Like, I want nothing to do with him.
It's crazy that it starts that young.
It does.
Yeah.
It's
All the
crazy
indicators are there. Yeah.
It's there.
Because you're making
Yeah.
me think now of people that I knew growing up. You know?
So now
So
you have
this-
the 6-year-old. Sorry, go on, man. I didn't want to.
No, it's so good because it starts, again, identity there. And they're smart enough to know that their reputation is they're the problem child or the class clown or whatever. You're the guy that can get my money back or get that guy's shoes. I like his shoes. And then it starts, there's a kid that I worked with when you were saying that. His name's Tyler. And I remember meeting him. He was 11. And I'm not going to say what neighborhood he's from, but he might be hearing this. He knows who he was. His nickname, I'm like, hey, I'm like seeing him sign up. He's coming for a sports camp. I'm like, your name's Tyler. He's like, T Trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, that's your name? He's like, yeah. I was like, who gave you that name? He's like, my mom. It's like, okay. So we go. And about 2 weeks in, he starts to change. He was trouble. I'll say that. Okay, he lived up to his name. Okay, he just never did anything, and he was like a little bit bigger for his size. So he, at 11, he looked like he was 14, 15. And certain kids from other neighborhoods, I knew 9-year-olds who are more mature than 29-year-olds in terms of what
90%.
they've been exposed to.
Yep.
Yeah, like for real. If you had some trouble, you take the 9-year-old kid. Here, I need your help.
Yep.
So, at some point, this kid changed, and he was around older guys that he looked up to that were athletes that were doing strong academically, and he was exposed to something different. I remember about 2 to 3 weeks into the camp, we're like, okay, guys, can you everyone pick up chairs and move them to the sides of the room? And I was close to him, so T Trouble picks up a chair, and he starts to move it to the side of the room, and then he drops the chair, and I look at him, and I'm wondering, and he's all in his own head, and he's like, what am I doing? And he actually said it out loud. He's like, I'm T Trouble, right? So I grab him, in the nicest way in the 90s when you're allowed to, and I grab him. I'm like, bro, your name's Tyler, okay? Your name's Tyler. And I said, and we sat and talked, and he basically like he stopped himself because he was doing something good, helping out for a common goal of just moving a chair, and his own it conflicted with the identity that was his entire life.
Yep.
Okay, so from what I know, this he's doing incredibly well. Okay,
Well,
okay.
To his story about, you said his mom. His
Yeah,
mom.
his mom called him.
And then you mentioned about just regards to growing up with the mom might not be there a lot. I'm going to throw out a statement that you hear a lot.
Sure.
How did your parents raise you? So you hear that a lot. So and usually
I don't know.
that statement goes out to, not to you, but it goes out to kids when they're doing something wrong. Like, did your mother, did you talk like that around your mother with that kind of mouth, that kind of stuff? But the way people like talk, the way people they act, I've heard it. How did your mother raise you or your parents raise you for you to be the way you are? How much of a factor is parents?
Massive.
In the way they...
Massive. Let me finish off this kid story, and I'll tell you where the parents come into play and
Okay.
where we learned that lesson.
All right.
So 3 years old, problems at home, does naughty things, mom gives attention. 6 years old, gets to school, has school failure. And I know people have said kids don't fail school. Listen, there's a difference between passing and being successful.
Right.
All right, so big deal, you passed. Great, you got into grade 1. You didn't make it. You know what I mean? You're not successful by any means in terms of what you need to accomplish at kindergarten. So kindergarten, that same behavior occurs, right? And this kid's kind of isolated again, realizes when I do bad things, I get that attention. Now we look at the age of 9 when he's kind of developing a peer group. And look at the city of Toronto. And I know for me growing up, when I was around that age, it was like, listen, man, you just got to be home before the streetlights come on. Go out after school, do your thing. We play sports, get into trouble. But when the streetlights come on, I got to be home. Well, now in the city of Toronto, that's foreign for me. My kids, man, they don't go out without me. Like, that's just it's a lockdown
true, man.
with me, right?
It's true.
It's
Same
lockdown.
like with us. Yeah.
But
different world now.
But in the city of Toronto, there's neighborhoods where you have 6-year-olds playing by themselves in the lobby.
Yes.
Right? It's the way it goes.
That's right.
So you have this kid who 3 is a problem, 6 is a problem, 9 years old. Now they're on their home where mom says, potentially, you got so much energy, I can't deal with you. Go outside and dump your energy.
Exactly.
So the kid's out, going to play, quote unquote. Now, what is the likelihood of that kid finding kids like him or kids not like him?
Like him.
Like him.
We were
Right.
talking about that. Like-minded kids find
Yeah.
like-minded kids.
Yeah.
So now you have this 9-year-old who's unsupervised because mom's got other stuff she's got to deal with, or dad, whoever, and now he finds his crew,
Yeah.
right? 6, 7 guys that are all like him.
Those that are wild in the wild. That's what
right.
it is.
And then the biggest indicator is child delinquency. Where that word delinquency is an American word primarily, but we adopted it up here because all delinquency means is it's criminal acts that kids do. So look, what do we say when a kid in school at grade 4 who's 9 years old says to another kid, give me your lunch money, I'm going to push you? What do we call that?
Bully.
Bullying. You know what that's called if you're over the age of 12?
What?
Extortion. That's robbery,
Yes.
right? So now they're already practicing these criminal behaviors without even knowing it because it's kind of what happens. And then between the age of 9 and 15, so 9 and 15 is a clutch period because that's where we have the individual risk factors come in where now you're a full-fledged gang member. You're wearing the clothes.
What
you're
age?
repping it. 15.
Wow.
15 is when they start identifying as a full-fledged
That's
gang
grade
member.
10?
That's in grade 10. And this is 2007 publication saying that, right? Which means
Yeah,
that
it's
data is
ear-
probably from 2003.
That's old.
Which
That's
means that stuff
definitely
is
old.
And I'll tell you in our experience, it's accelerated, man. It is accelerated where you're having 11-year-old, 10-year-olds
Yes.
identifying as gang members.
Yeah, I knew an
Wow.
11-year-old who, from when he was 9, again, bigger kid, when he was 9 in his neighborhood, the older guys, the patriarchs of the community, identified him. They're like, this guy's a leader.
Wow.
They said to him, look, come.
Oh,
And
geez.
They gave him Jordans. Then the next week, gave him some basketball jerseys.
Mhm.
Next week, he had a bike. Then eventually they knew that they could trust him, and they gave him a microphone. And they said, anytime a car pulls into the neighborhood that you don't recognize, press the button. And that's all he had to do. He just had to sit outside, play, pick his nose, and press this microphone. And they gave him $100 cash every day.
Yeah,
From
that's
the age of 9.
That's
So
the
by the time
beginning.
by the time he was 11, he was a full-fledged gang member, like smuggling coke and holding this and
Jeez,
okay.
man.
Yeah.
He was 11 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we got that 11-year-old turns into a 15-year-old, full-fledged gang member doing shootings, robberies,
Yeah.
abductions, breaking and enter, stealing cars, all the stuff that gang members would traditionally do at that level of being a full-fledged gang member. And then they go through the youth criminal justice system, and then at the age of 18 is when it becomes a community risk factor issue because now it's serious community violence.
Yeah.
And that's where you're getting daytime drive-by shootings. You're getting, 3 or 4 people shot. You have stuff like, and I don't know.
Home invasions.
Home
things.
invasion, stuff like that. And
Yeah.
that's when, generally speaking, the public gets together and says, well, wait a minute, somebody has to do something about this.
Yes.
Right? And that's where police get the pressure to say, guys, what are you doing about this?
Clean it up.
Clean it up.
Clean
and
it
we
up.
go and we clean it up as best as we can, but we can't do it efficiently without a buy-in from the community or community members who see the value of what we're doing. So this gang prevention piece is the extension piece of what do we do after that?
Can I speak on that?
Yeah.
Because you are police.
Yeah.
I'll say from this side, I remember, one of the neighborhoods, which is mostly buildings, police never pulled their cruisers close to the building because TVs, cinder blocks, bricks, whatever could be thrown on it. Okay? And so think of the challenge.
Yeah.
Is that one balcony that says and decides to do that representative of the entire community? No, it holds the whole community hostage in a way.
It does.
And it's like the police are coming to help the community to truly serve it, but this is the treatment. And then, so there's this whole cycle, like, hold on, don't talk good about the police. You know what they did to my cousin with this home invasion and all, like, so it's a tough cycle. It's systemic. It's almost, the fact that you're even treading in this territory, it's so foreign.
It is foreign.
Okay, I'm actually amazed to hear that you guys are philosophically, academically, intellectually approaching and trying to understand what's going on in these neighborhoods for the point of to educate cops for 6 months to find indicators on how you could save kids from going there. That's a narrative that people don't know.
No.
They don't know that at all. They're just because the general consensus is, especially in our day and age with social media and all the worst stories out of America trickling up here, is this whole thing that all cops are corrupt.
Yeah.
And to never trust them, and they couldn't care, and they're all racially profiling and stopping, and that's not the whole. Guaranteed, it's not the whole.
Listen, there's minorities everywhere, and there's exceptions to the rule, but you can't. Listen, I try to stop myself by saying you can't or you must, because that's not true. So if I say it, it's out of habit. My thought on that is a few things. One is exceptions to the rule are just that, exceptions to the rule. And if you know of a dirty cop, or you tell us, because we hate them just as much as everybody else, they make our job tremendously difficult to do.
Yes.
So we don't want them in. And we look at these quote-unquote dirty cops or cops that get arrested. Well, who found them? Cops found them. We have no tolerance for that in the inside, right? They're a minority of a minority of a minority.
Yeah.
And also the side piece of that too is, and this is kind of something where it's really weird, man. And I had to kind of realize this by doing things like this and talking to people is, what type of person you have to be to decide to become a police officer. Think about that, right? People automatically assume that cops just came from great backgrounds and we got an awesome family and we play hockey. They automatically assume we grew up in places that are really privileged.
Yes.
I can tell you, firsthand of being on that side and being on this side, man, we're a thin line away. All right.
Yes.
All we are is ultimately people who've come up from that type of thing, had experiences. Because really, if you push back to, not why you're doing what you're doing, but what happened for you to do what you do, in majority of the cases, not all of them, when I speak to other coppers about this to really get them in their mindset, say, how do we approach other people? It's not by for me to be an effective communicator with you, it's not you that's the problem. It's me. So I have to adjust myself to ensure that I'm sending messages appropriate to you.
Yeah, I have a buddy who calls about to be on the same frequency.
Yeah,
that's how he says it. That's in order to, and that's what I'm saying. A program doesn't find the frequency of the people. Only person to person can get that.
And the program provides framework, but you need people to fill that framework and to push it to the next step.
Yes.
So with that being said, when I said coppers need to learn about themselves, I do that with them too, and say, listen, let's identify with what happened for you to get you to want to do this job. That you get free coffee once in a while and you get to carry a gun and lights, but let's look at what the impacts are there. It's not an easy job to do. It's not a fun job to do. There's some fun parts about it, but majority of the time you're waking up every day, you're going to a place where majority of the population appreciates the police, majority of it. And I'll tell you where the evidence of that is. Last week we had a Project Kraken, where a Chester Lee gang was taken down into 8-month investigation. 27 guns were taken off. Fentanyl, cocaine, proceeds of crime being money.
That was Chester Lee, huh?
That was Chester Lee, right? They all got taken down. And I'd posted up stuff on my social media on my work social media. And the amount
I know some of the families in Chester Lee. I didn't hear about that. Okay.
And it'll pop up eventually on that side of it. But, the amount of outpouring of support that I got afterwards that I did not hear when I put up all the other, touchy-feely stuff. There was a lot of people that are good. Yeah. Go get them. We don't want them in our areas. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's wrong either. I'm saying there's two narratives to this. And blending the two, it's next to impossible. But it's nice to hear from both sides to say, okay, there's kind of roles for everything into it, because traditionally speaking, as much as I'm talking about these kids that ultimately, through horrible circumstances, become gang members and do violent things, the other part to that, which is the police end of things, is they victimize people. There's real victims to violent things that they do, and while there's horrible circumstances that produce somebody to become a violent gang member, you still need to be held accountable for what you do out of respect for the justice system and the victims of these crimes. You're talking about mothers who lose their kids. You're talking about average people driving by. You're talking about victims of sex trafficking, family members who lose loved ones to drug overdoses. Where are the drugs coming from? Right? All those things taken into play. So it's a real conflicting space to be in. And you almost got to find your lens and focus on that. But with us, it's finding out what happened. What do we do from here?
Okay.
You know, it is very conflicting. I'll say this. I can say it personally. From personal conflict, there was an age, probably 15 to 18 specifically, that my life became very dark. And I distinctly remember looking in the mirror and hating who I saw. I say that, I've had this conversation with a couple of people that, you know, when I hear comments like, oh man, you know, people choose this or they do that, or it's about the choices you make. And like, you know, people should respect other people and be decent. And like, I get that for the whole. There's a point though where someone kind of gets into a space where they don't care about anybody else. And I'll tell you this, if I hate the person in the mirror, I couldn't care less about the next person. Okay, so this whole thing of, you know, do unto others as you would unto yourself and all these golden rules that work, there's an X factor to that. Because if you truly have such conflict that you hate who you are, you do not care about that next person in any way. And I knew for me personally, I was like a ticking time bomb at any moment. For me, God saved me from that. He saved me truly from that life. I had a picture. This is before the internet. I had a picture. I haven't said this publicly. I had a picture of a guy who wronged someone that I knew, and I found out who he was. I got his photo. I cut out his face, and I had it in my wallet for 3 years, and I carried it for 3 years for the moment I saw him. Okay, I didn't know what I was going to do, but that guy would not live a moment after I met him, guaranteed. After I made peace with God, and I felt like I was forgiven for who I was, and I could start a new life. Coincidentally, I saw this guy 2 weeks after, and I saw him, I think it was at Burger King, and I see the back of his head, and I'm like, I kind of look, and it's this guy, and I went up to him, and I shook his hand, and I said, hey man, I said, do you remember something happened with a buddy of mine? And he kind of looked at me, because he knows what he did on his end. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, bro, it's all forgiven. And I said, look, just so you know, I'm privy of what kind of happened. I'm going to make sure that nothing happens with it. And it's interesting. He doesn't know what I would have done to him, but I was actually the messenger to tell him that I'd make sure nothing got done. Yeah. Okay, so like think the bizarre. Like when I look back on it, it's bizarre. Like he doesn't know, and that's how fragile it is. That line. Yeah. Okay, I say that because when I go back to the conflict, it's nothing that like, there's as much as that we can do outside. I knew as much as we did sports programs and we had support things for mothers, and there's just something inside within somebody, within their own soul that if there's nothing that addresses that. You know, that it can almost be like all the effort's fleeting.
Yeah, it's much deeper.
Yes, it's much deeper.
And trust me, man, we're completely aware of how deep it is. And when I say we, I'm not just talking about myself. I'm talking about all the people we work with, as well as our chief of police and the deputy chief. Like that's not 100%. We realize how deep it is. When they let us explore this space, the idea was get guys out of gangs. So we didn't want to just make something up, a program, and be like, okay, we got a way to do this. We wanted to find evidence-based things. It was finding things that actually work, that have been evaluated. What works? Why would we make something up if you might have something that works? I would just take it from you and do it here. We couldn't find anything in the entire world that works to get a gang member out of a gang. So when we came back and we said, listen, man, we can't find anything and we can't even think of something. There's nothing in the entire world that can get a gang member out of a gang that's been evaluated and proven to work.
What?
Because, think of it this way, 36 risk factors. 5 categories. Let's just work on the numbers of that mathematically. 5 categories is an easy number to work with. If I were to give you 5 balls and each ball represented a different set of problems, and I were to say to you, come up with, show me how many different number combinations of 5 we can make. Do you know what that number is? 3,125.
Okay.
So if you're telling me I can develop one program to deal with 3,125 individual problems,
Right.
you're
Yeah.
a billionaire.
Yeah.
You're going to be a trillionaire.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we broke that down to the 36 risk factors, and we did that mathematically. And that's 150 unvigatillion, which is 150 with 69 zeros after it.
Oh my God.
So once we had that kind of realization, we realized, okay, there's no single program, but we have all these risk factors identified.
Wow.
Well, let's see if there's programs to deal with these risk factors that have been proven to work and that are free and that are localized. So our whole gang prevention model right now, and the way it kind of works is we have 4 pillars. One is gang education, so an awareness. So it's coming out to do stuff like this, teaching people the gang risk factors. This is what you look out for. But the other education piece is exactly talking to community members, people that were involved in it, people who haven't been involved in it, victims of crime, as well as all the impacted stakeholders. And what I mean by that is this is bigger than the police, man. You got to incorporate families. You got to incorporate community housing, schools, hospitals, prosecution services, jails, probation and parole,
Businesses.
your mental health institution,
Yeah.
local businesses,
Yeah.
social service agencies. We're all impacted. We're all impacted by it differently. There's no legal definition of a gang across the world because of the different impact groups. So, for example, gangs impact police very differently than they impact schools. So we can't use our definition of a gang and say that's what happens in schools.
Yeah,
It
it's
doesn't
not
work that
applicable.
way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They impact communities different. They impact real estate value, big business, economic opportunities. So you got to bring in all these partner groups. So the last 2 years, we've been liaising with all these partner agencies, both horizontally and vertically in the city. So horizontally being Toronto Community Housing, the English and the Catholic, the public and the Catholic school boards, CAMH, whole bunch of different agencies on a horizontal level. City of Toronto,
Children's Aid.
all these people we've been liaising with horizontally to say, listen, we need your buy-in on this. We need your input. We need to figure out a solution across the board horizontally, as well as vertically being municipal government, provincial government, and the federal government. To say, okay, there needs to be some chain up here, and we need to have some sort of cross. We need to have a T here where we're all in alignment with a lexicon of language.
It's amazing.
Right, to bring them all in to say this if we really want to attack this problem, and the problem is we're not attacking gangs. 50% of gangs are under the age of 18. We're not doing it. We're attacking gang violence. Right, there's a difference between a gang and gang violence.
Ron, let me ask you this just for a second. So obviously the solution of trying to help someone get out of a gang right now is very, very difficult. Okay?
Extremely difficult.
I want to go right down to the root.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a parent.
Yes.
I don't think any parent
Yep.
says in their mind before they even have their child, I hope my son becomes a gang member. I don't think any parent wants that. So the question is, if based on what happens and their children do go into it, maybe they're doing something. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe they're not paying attention. Like you said, for example, one is not paying attention. If there's a parent listening right now, okay, at the end of the day, gang members are getting bread every single day. Some way they're going to eventually get there. Some of them
There are
okay?
second and third generation gang
There are.
members.
Well,
now,
yeah, well,
just
yeah.
to know,
but
just to say.
I would
that-
probably assume they're the minority.
I don't know. I wouldn't be able to answer that fairly and give you an
Yeah.
accurate. But
I'll just give you a picture on that. I remember walking into a house to have a kid come.
Yeah.
Behind him in his living room, he's like, "Dad, where's my ball?" And his dad was with a bunch of buddies, and on the coffee table had a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of Coke. Okay, and this is the coffee.
Cocaine, right?
Cocaine.
Right.
Yeah, cocaine. Yeah,
Not-
sorry,
not
not
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's on the coffee table.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, and he was 11. Then he had a younger sister who was like 7, and then 5 and 3. I think was their ages, something like that. And they're literally just all running around.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, yeah, you're going. What's up, Revy? They say hi to me. Like, that's how they grew up.
Okay. So look, there's.
And I just say within the clothes, and this, you're thinking, I'm not talking about like suburb, but watches Boys in the Hood, gets inspired, and says, you know what, I'm gonna choose a red bandana because I like the color and it goes with my eyes.
Which is
sure.
a thing.
Which is the thing.
Which is the thing.
That's
For
a
sure.
wild thing right
Yeah.
now.
Yep.
That's a whole new expression.
So look, look. There could be that growing up into a family gang. They could be watching something influential and saying, "Hey, I want to be that guy." But then there's also of just your surrounding or your upbringing
Yeah.
gets you there, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a parent listening to this, and to avoid my son becoming a gun member, I have to not do this.
Oh, man.
What would that be?
I wish I had an answer for you.
See,
Here's the
so
thing.
part of the question is the problem.
Well, look.
Yeah.
Because no, you hear what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
the question, it's so convenient to just phrase it like that. It's so it
Yeah.
makes it so simple. It's
No,
just like
I know.
No, you get what I'm
Yeah, no,
saying.
for
though.
sure.
There
Look,
is like
Look, my daughter's she's going into grade 9 in September.
Yeah.
And then my first thought process was, oh, she's going into grade 9. Everyone's talking about, oh my goodness, because I kind of forgotten what it's like to be in high school, right?
Of course.
Something, oh man, she's going into school grade 9. It's not going to be a problem. It's like grade 8.
Yeah.
But then I'm thinking, wait a second, she's going to high school with grade 10s, 11s, and 12s. And to me, there is the influence to the grade 9ers, as they say, the Niner minors or the minor Niners, right? So to me, even though we've given her a great upbringing and shown her, like, the differences of right and wrong and all those other, things, at the end of the day, something is going to happen. And I tell her this, I go, Hannah, when you go to school, the friends you know now may not be the same friends you know as you get older in grade 10, 11. Some of them might do this, some of them might do that, some of them, and at the end of the day, people are going to take their paths, right?
Yeah.
But it's from influence, right?
It is.
And then it's how strong are you as an individual now to ensure that you do not get influenced in a wrong direction. I know I shouldn't be smoking, but all my friends are doing it. Do I have the strength and confidence as an inner person to say, no, I'm not going to do that?
Well, let me ask you. So, what do you feel as a parent that you've done that you think, for the large majority, she'd be fine? That she wouldn't.
You're turning this on me.
Exactly, the year of deflection, as you said.
I know who I am as an individual, and I can also speak on experience to my kids.
Yeah.
So, first of all, the most simplest things, like, as having a child raise up around manners and being a person of good character and treating others with respect, and the most simple, but pushing on that, right?
Yeah.
Pushing on that. When I hear you say things like, well, like, a parent not being there because they got to do these 17-hour days and work, and then the kids left by themselves. I mean, you're definitely getting, look, you leave a dog home by himself, a young dog, he's going to rip your whole house apart out of he just wants to let out this, like, aggressiveness, his energy, right? So to me, like, I think I have partial answer, right, on that, but I wonder if there was some sort of stat that got pulled from, when you speak to these gang members and you hear their stories, if they let you hear their story.
They do.
Okay.
Because it's so there's a whole bunch of things, and it's kind of stuff where, for me, it's a mix of personal and professional, right? And, I put 2 years into it, and it wasn't just the 2 years of impactful things at work. It was also impactful at home. So I had a real pressure cooker situation happening where I had to figure something out, right, to really align myself. And some of the key points I'll have to anybody who wants to really get through to a gang member. And before I do that, let me just mention the parent. I want you to think about this, right? Your parents, when you compare your life to your parents' life, which was more difficult? Your parents' life, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
And same with me. I couldn't even imagine, going through what my parents had to go through at all. Like, we think racism is bad now.
Oh, man.
Man, my dad has a turban, man, and I remember when he came here, man, the amount of stuff that I remember at the age of young age, you hearing that? And that guy went through it, right?
Wow.
And he lived through it. And not only that, so now I have, according to him, I'm spoiled, which I have a fantastic life. I have nothing to complain about. Man, we're in the best country in the world, right? Like,
Is that what he says? You're spoiled. You're spoiled.
He goes,
son.
look at you.
Look at you.
It's a typical thing. Like, look at you. What are you complaining about, right? That's his typical. I might break my leg. He'd be like, that's nothing. I'll walk it off. You're lazy.
Right.
Do you know what I went through? I killed something. Like,
I know. Yeah.
So, and then I look at my kids, and my kids are spoiled beyond me.
Right.
But the point of that is we got to align that same thing with a parent. So, for example, if you have a kid who's a gang member, how hard was that parent's life?
Right.
You just said it yourself. Nobody wants that, yet it happens.
Right.
So we had one kid in particular where we kept losing him, right? And he fit the bill on the head. He told the story well. And when we ended up going talking, we kind of had an off idea of let's go talk to the mom. And under the age 18, we always include the parents. And it's all volunteer-based, right? So we have to influence. So we go to the mom very early on, and we knocked on the door. Listen, man, we talked to you. We've been speaking to your son. We don't know what's up with him. What's going on with you? And we made her fill out those risk factor sheets. And she had more than the son. And now it was starting to make sense. Oh, wow. My God. Her son was
he's doing better.
He was doing better than her.
He's actually doing better.
Way better than her. You think about it. She was 40. She had 5 kids, right? And her oldest was like, I think, 21.
Yeah.
Right? 40. 21, 5 kids by herself.
Yeah.
In community housing. Right?
Which is a norm. That is.
Which is, I hate to say it, man, but it's not surprising to anybody when we say that here. Everybody's like, yeah, okay. Like that's just the idea behind it. So now you got that issue there, and you're talking about parents, and we're like, okay, now we talk to the parents and we realize, okay, the mom might be where we need to focus, or the dad might be where, because they're more receptive to seeking help, because they have their hands up. They're like, how much more can I do? I don't know what else to do. They're frustrated. They don't want their kid getting arrested. They don't want their kid getting shot at. They don't want to hear it. They develop anxiety, PTSD, and depression from it. Not only that, but we have 16, 17-year-olds that we'll have a relationship with, that we're really trying to motivate them to get out of a gang. And as you talk to them, I'm not a clinician. I can't diagnose people, but what I can tell you is based on definition, I see depression, I see PTSD, and I see severe anxiety. And when I hear as to why or what happened for them to be the way they are, it makes sense to me. Right? Where you have a 17-year-old kid who at the age of 12 sees a first homicide, at the age of 14 sees a second homicide, at the age of 16 now he's being shot at. And meanwhile, he's 17 and he's like paranoid in the area. Now he's going to be potentially strapped up and looking around the block. Okay, I get it, man. What am I going to say to the guy, right? How do I phrase things? How do I rebuild their perspective? And it's all perspective management. So one of the tricks that I have, and this is from my wife. She had bought me this book. I don't know if you guys have heard of it before, and it's my go-to book for all this stuff. It's called The 5 Love Languages. Have you guys ever heard of that?
No.
Amazing book, man. 100% must read.
Okay.
They have 3 versions of it, all right? There's teenagers, there's family, and there's kids. And my wife, she got me this book 5 years ago. She left it on my dresser, right, or my drawer by the table, or by the bed.
That's stealth. Huh? She just leaves it.
She
there
drops
for
it and she goes, "Hey, read this," right?
Yeah.
So whatever. I didn't read it because she told me to read it.
Right? It's not even wrapped or anything. It's just placed.
She just left it. She goes, "Hey, read this," and walks away from it. It sits there, collects dust.
Yeah.
So about a year ago, I was off work, sick for a little bit. And it was one of those sicknesses where you don't even want to get up and watch TV. You don't want to play video games. You don't do anything. You just want to sit in your bed.
Yes.
You don't want to see my phone. There's the book, so I dust it off. I read it, and right away, I found instant application for this book at work. Right away. So what it is a doctor, name's Dr. Chapman, and he's practiced family psychology for 30 years, and he's come to this realization that he hypothesizes that all people speak one, if not 2, of 5 different love languages. And that is words of affirmation, acts of service, physical touch, quality time, and receiving gifts. All right. So when I read it, a couple things happened. And there's a quiz you could take. It's 30 questions. And it tells you your primary and your secondary love language. And this is where it applies to this. I'll tell you my personal life. So when I read it, I found out, or I realized that I'm a words of affirmation guy. So words matter to me. Right. So my wife would come home from work and I would say all nice things to her. And it wouldn't mean anything to her. So she'd come home from work having a hard day, and I'd be like, "Hey, you look nice." And she'd be like, "Oh, you left the garbage. The garbage truck already came. You missed it last week."
Right.
And then we get into a fight because I'd be like, "You know what kind of day I've had?" And meanwhile, I still went out of my way to say something nice to you.
Not the same frequency. There you go. Yeah.
Frequency. So she'd come back and be like, "Oh, that doesn't mean anything." So I read the book and I realize, oh, I'm a words of affirmation guy. But then I also realize what my wife is, and she's an acts of service person. She just wants stuff done.
Yes.
So we've been together a long time, man, and I realized, man, I wasted a decade.
But that actually speaks to women, right? Actions speak louder than words, right? For them, they actually want to see.
Some.
Yeah.
Right? Not all. My wife is that type of person.
So, Christina, who are you? Are you a person of action or words?
I'm actually physical touch.
Oh,
yeah.
Physical touch,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, I read this
amazing
book.
to know that.
And words of affirmations. Words mean something.
Yeah.
But here, take the flip side to that. So, if words mean something to me, how do I hurt people? I say mean things. Right. So, and then in turn, what hurts me the most is when people say mean things to me. And then acts of service, it's like, okay, if I do something for you, it means a lot to you. So my wife, I just stopped saying nice things and I started asking her what she wants me to do, and I would just do it. And then my life changed, right? It was like, I wasted no energy speaking.
I'm learning right now.
Dude, it's amazing.
I'm going through 15 years of marriage in my head.
Me too.
What did I do wrong?
So like, I put it to test one day. And here's the thing, man. I will never tell anybody or advise anybody on anything unless I've done it myself. I don't do that stuff. I don't believe in it. It's just, I must have done it. My actions have to match my dialogue and narrative, right?
Yes.
That's how you become genuine and real. So anyways, my wife, I started doing that stuff. And then the other ones are like quality time. People who just like to binge watch Netflix, and how they get angry with you is they avoid you, right? They just ignore you like the plague. And there's physical touch. And generally speaking, with physical touch with kids, particularly, they enjoy hugs, you know, pats on the back. And I mean, there's some adults where a hug will change their day.
Right.
It's a physical touch thing.
Yes.
So, and then when they get angry, sometimes some kids will resort to physical violence. So that should be an indicator of this kid speaks that language. So
that's me. That's definitely me.
So all those things, right? So I read the book, and right away I'm like, okay, I know how to apply this to my life. I'm going to practice it with my wife and my family. And it worked extremely well. And I said, man, I removed resistance in totally controllable places. And I started to have influence because I understood the language in which to communicate. So, for example, if I really wanted something from my wife, or I wanted to motivate her to do something, I would have to speak in her language, not mine. She doesn't value my language. So I took that, I brought it into work, and we tried it with gang members. And it works.
Wow.
It works. Okay. Because now I had to break this kid down potentially and be like, what language does this kid speak? And because in order for me to communicate, I have to do it efficiently and on a level that they're going to have value in. What's going to fulfill them in the conversation.
They have to connect.
It makes sense. Happy wife, happy life.
No,
so you take those same principles and you apply it to gangs.
No, for sure.
And we're good.
Listen, I'll tell you this, and this is the best way to describe it. I can tell, and I know you can, and most people can, when someone's being genuine and when someone's being fake.
Yep.
Okay, you can tell right off the bat. Okay, so to me, if you're going to be able to speak their language, and they will tell right off the bat if you're going to come in a certain way, if you're trying to fake, and if they sense that, you'll lose credibility instantly with them.
1,000,000%.
And it's done.
Yeah.
It's done. It's like you're that guy now.
Yeah.
Ron,
Then you have a textbook thrown at the side of your head.
yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
yeah.
Literally.
For real.
Because imagine that. Let's just go back to that. Let's say your guidance counselor just said to you, you know what, man? Let's say you even sat beside you, or you guys had enough of a relationship, he could give you a hug. What if he just got up and said, like, I got to give you a hug, man. Like, I feel like you need this.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, and you give you that hug. What would that have potentially done for you?
It would have been the Goodwill Hunting scene, for real, where he says, "Not your fault." You know, where you know the movie, obviously. I mean, that's crazy for me. That whole thing.
Yep.
The part of my persona was to be so wild that it's to keep people back, because I was afraid of what could happen. I knew my potential. I was always a high achiever. School was easy. I was gifted musically, in the arts, gifted athletically, and I knew when I looked in the mirror, I've done nothing with it. And then, so that's kind of that cycle of self-hate was actually birthed in that. And then, you know, it's funny that you said that. I had an athletic director, a teacher who, in his own way, he spoke a language for me that helped me. He said to me, he's like, look, you can come in the gym whenever you want. And he let me, for my last 2 years of high school, he never asked me why I'm not in class. He just let me go in the gym, and I could lift weights or shoot hoops. Okay, I'd spend literally days there in a row. Another thing, I had a principal my last year of high school, first week of school, he brings me in his office. He was an athlete, okay? His exact words, Mr. John Brisbois, if you're out there hearing this. He was actually a tennis player, high-level tennis player. He says, he's like, Mr. Reventar, I know you're selling weapons. He's like, you need to stop. He goes, for the last year and a half, all of the teachers have been asking me to kick you out of the school. Okay, he's like, I'm not going to. And I remember when he said that, that's when I looked up at him. I wasn't paying attention. I was just sitting there, brought in his office. And I remember looking at him, and he goes, listen, I'm giving you a free pass. Teachers won't ask you for assignments. They won't even take your attendance. He said, you can sleep in class if you want. I just ask that you just don't disrupt the other students, please. He goes, but you can come here freely, but I need you to come to school, okay? So I remember just looking at him, and I remember thinking, like, what? Like, it doesn't make sense. He's talking, these words don't line up. You're the principal, okay? And he said to me, his exact words, he goes, I need you to come to school, because if I kick you out, I know I'm going to see you on the news, okay? And so this is no joke. From those words, that whole year, I didn't cause any trouble. I didn't do anything. I drank. I slept in the cafeteria. I just literally kind of, I loitered, okay? Right? I loafed. I laid down, but I didn't cause any problems. And like, I say that he spoke to me in a way and it got through to me. He said something a little bit different that no one has ever said. Did he go deep? He didn't go deep. Did he get in my problems with me? No. You know, and that's why I say that maybe if someone did, I wish that someone was brave enough that they would see past what I threw out there as barking and biting, you know. And that's why but they did something. They did something. They spoke a language to me that, in a way, penetrated me in a little bit different. Like, to the fact that whole year that I did nothing in the school, I just literally showed up and was kind of and just didn't push my weight or pull or extort or anything like that. It shows that it actually was really effective. Yeah. You know, but I think about what if someone actually did a little bit more with the language.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, this is a true story. When I was 21, my mom hugged me for the first time. Okay. And I remember coming back from a prayer group, no joke, come in the house, and my mom's amazing. Okay. My mom's amazing. And she comes from a tough background, from a communist country. Okay. And was raised through a mother who been through World War II. So, like, it's all these things, man. Yeah. Like, you say risk factors, if we were to go through it, you know, we only kind of know it in our own way, man. If you apply it to the world, wow, some people, that's all they know.
Yeah, that's it, man.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, you're from this part of the world. Yeah, okay, like, everyone is 20 and up, you know?
Yeah.
I say that I remember coming in the house, it was 1 a.m, and I was met with a broom, okay? You can elaborate.
Yeah.
I was called the devil.
Yeah.
I was all these things. And I remember, this is the truth. I believe I hear God's voice so clear. And I'm no prone to violence. My trigger for violence was violence. So touch, because my language is touch.
Yeah.
So you could say anything to me and it will not faze me. Okay, but if you put your finger and push my forehead, I don't know what I would do next.
Yep.
And that's okay, or anything like that. So we're touching. She's touching me. And I remember hearing so distinctly, and it wasn't my voice, and I just heard, hug her. Okay? And it's like a movie. I grabbed my mom and I hugged her, and I'm stronger than her, so I hugged her. And hits turned into like open hand, kind of slow pats, and then she broke into sobbing. She just started bawling. And she said, "You have me so scared." That's what she said. "You have me so scared." She said, I'm terrified. When you leave the house, I don't know if you're ever going to come back. Okay? And I say that because the fear makes people do all these things. You know, I believe that when we have these bad incidents with bad policing, it's from fear.
Yeah, of course.
I know it. We know the front lines, man. I know the problems of the street.
Yeah.
When people make dumb decisions, it's because of fear.
Yeah.
They have better sense. They don't really want to do this. It has nothing to do with race, but fear might be attached to the race.
Yeah.
Because of the segregation, or they don't really understand. And the more that I think that the more that you have this dialogue, the more you understand they're just like me.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, man. And
It is, man. We're all people, buddy. We're all people. Like
exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Actually, there was a Toronto Police superintendent who's high up who actually frames something for me, and I steal stuff from people all the time, right? I'm all about R&D, which is rob and duplicate. Right? That's my motto, right?
Yeah.
So I'm all about that because there's so many people with amazing ideas, and I'm like, I got it. Like that, I'm taking in my brain. And the superintendent said,
so you're using those high risk factors for good.
I do always, man. Everything you got to switch everything positive, right? So you have to attach new meanings to old words,
yes,
and then they mean something different.
It's not exploitation.
Yeah.
It is.
It's
not.
education.
It's education, right? So we take what works and we make it. Anyways, the superintendent says, he goes, the problem is, and he wasn't talking about the community. He was talking internally about policing. He says we adopt each other's experiences as if they're our own, right? So, for example, a police officer might come across somebody and it might be a violent situation, and then they come back and they tell people, and now everybody else might get amped up and say, oh man, if you come across this type of person, like this is what happens all the time. It's the same thing in the community, right? Is they will adopt everybody else's experience as if it's their own, without asking questions. So we're all the same, man. Like, forget names, forget titles, forget organizations. If you're in the world just to help, like we talked before, you guys said you want to inspire people, we're all the same. We all want the same thing. We just have different tools to do it. The real work is putting us all together like Voltron. To say this is how we're going to operate together, integrating it formally. And that's a massive undertaking, but it's totally in line with what you said, man. And it's like, your physical touch with your mom hugging you, that means something to you now.
Yeah.
Then you don't realize in the moment.
No, you don't.
You don't, but you remember. Like, again, for me, I had one teacher
I'll remember that for the rest of my life.
Yeah, because that's an impactful moment for you.
Yeah.
So with kids, particularly gang kids, once I figure out their language, and there's a couple ways, I'll spend maybe 5 minutes going through the 5 love languages in my own way to see which one does this person physically respond to. And some of them, they're so open to it. There's a 30-question quiz you could do, or questionnaire. You just give it to them. It's free online. You give it to them, and they fill it out, and it's real lovey-dovey, so it's hard to get some people over it. It's like, what means more to me, a hug or like a rose? But and I think
that'd be great to bring in a bunch of gang members and be like, hey guys,
they do it.
Yeah.
And I did this with cops too. So I do this with cops.
This
is
is amazing,
right?
You gotta film this.
We run workshops, and it's all about relationship building to effectively communicate, to get messaging and motivating. Right, especially these gang members. I can't, like you said, people matter, right? So we find our champions, and we say, okay, this is what we did, man. I use these 5 love languages. Here's a quiz. Find out your own. Apply it to your own life. Do it. Believe in it, and then apply it at work. And you'd be surprised with how much you remove conflict and resistance. It's just communication. So with the gang kids, some of them I'll just give them the sheet, and I'll just be like, listen, this looks real soft, but it's just me and you or whatever. I just need you to be honest. I'll be back in like 10 minutes. Just take your time with it. And if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. But trust me, I'll explain this to you, man, and this will matter for you. Like, you're going to walk away with something you could do today. That's going to help you. And they all have done it, the ones that I've done it with. And they all do it. And then you see it, and you physically see their posture change and their personality change when you start to effectively communicate with them, right? Like, I had this one kid, I'll just say under the age of 15, or younger, on the younger spectrum, right? So between 10 and 15, but on the younger spectrum, got into an altercation at school where put a knife to another kid's throat and said, I'm going to kill you. All right, so cops go to investigate. Kid's actually a very decent kid. He's going to face a hefty suspension, but he's not troublesome, generally speaking.
Right.
So they intervened. They were part of the 2000 we educated, hit us up and said, listen, we kind of got somebody that fits your spectrum. We talked to the mom and the dad. They're interested in coming in and talk to you. So we have him come in, and I asked this kid, I said, man, tell me about what happened, right? And this is where I don't ask why. And this is one of the hard lessons we learned. We asked is, if I were to ask you why you did something, now, being older and we got kids and all that stuff, legitimately, I might not be able to give you an accurate answer. I don't know. I don't know why I did it. I'm going to come up with something that's going to satisfy me in the moment. I'm going to justify poor behavior with whys. Well, that person did this to me, so I had to do that to them because there's a point to prove. I don't ask that. I just say, what happened? Now I'm going to be able to identify, okay, what actually happened to you that made you want to do this? And so I asked this kid, what happened? We start with September. September, he gets, robbed a few times by another kid associated to a gang family. Happens over a couple months. They go back and forth, back and forth. But then I said, man, you put the knife to a girl's throat. Like, that's not this kid. And he goes, yeah, that girl called me stupid every day. So let's go back to the love languages there. What's this guy's language?
The words, man.
Words, man. This guy could take getting beat up every day. This guy can take getting robbed every day. But that girl who called him stupid every day?
Yeah. So interesting. That's powerful, man.
That's
just to know that, yeah.
So now with him, I'm like, got it. Okay, this is how I need to communicate everything going forward for him.
With words.
And his mother. We did it with his mother as well. They did it together, and we figured out their languages so they can connect a little bit better, so that she can impart some knowledge to him in a way he's going to understand. We can do it, and then we can satisfy kind of both of those needs to ensure that, hey, in the shortest amount of time, I can get the best information to you. Right? That's going to mean something to you.
So what is the closest solution? Even though it's very hard to identify how to get someone out, what is the closest solution that you find works, that the message to help someone leave a gang?
You know what? For me, and this is just a personal thing, the most success I've had is when I help create that vision for them and a blueprint on how to get there.
Okay.
So the vision is this, right? You ask same thing. We had a 13-year-old kid. I went to a school once. 13-year-old kid was a safe school transfer. What that means is that this kid was charged criminally, put on conditions to not be at that school. So they had a safe school transfer, right? So they try to not disrupt education, put him in the right place, or her, it doesn't matter. So this kid gets into the school. I go there to do a presentation. And when I get in there, it's like younger grades. It's like grade 4 to grade 9, right? And I get in there and the school says, hey, FYI, we had this kid just today brought here, and he's sitting in the back. So if you get some disruption, that's kind of what happened. He just got arrested by police and charged. So I'm like, okay, thank you for the heads up, and I'll navigate these waters when I get there. So I do my spiel, and I go through with it. And this kid was the most receptive to the whole thing. Yeah. He was like locked on, right? Because I was speaking to him.
That usually happens.
Yeah. So he all of a sudden he's like, what? So he starts to queue up and all the Q&A and the participation. This guy's like hands up for everything, right? And even the teachers are like, did not expect this guy to happen. So afterwards, it all ends. He comes back. He's like, hey, can I talk to you for a second? I'm like, what's up, man? And he's like, listen, like I want to play basketball for the rest of my life. And physically, he could do it. Like, he's taller than me, man. I'm 5'11", and this guy was like 13 or 14 and like 6'4".
Wow.
So he's there's something real here. This is a good potential. Plays rep ball, does all this stuff, and I go, okay. And so we kind of get into what happened, but I don't stay there too long because we talked about staying in the past. There's no how much more am I going to talk about how bad the problem is? I'm focused now on in the Toronto Police, I should say, not just me, but we're focused on our side on what do we do now going forward.
Yeah,
we can
finding
live
that purpose now. You were saying.
Find that purpose. So we find this kid and we have this little exercise we do with kids particularly, and we say, all right, who are the most important people to you in your life? They write it down. And there's a big thing with writing things, making them tangible, especially thoughts. Because we all have thoughts, but until you put them on pen and paper, they don't mean anything. They're not real to you. So he writes down, his 3 most important people. What does your dream life look like, including what does your house look like? What do you do every day? And who lives in that house with you? They write it out. And then we kind of go through a few other things, but with this kid in particular, he wanted to go to the NBA. His favorite player was like LeBron James. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, all right, do you know what LeBron did? And he's like, no, I have no idea what he had to do to get to the NBA. It's like, all right, man. I go, come with me. We're in the library, so we find his biography, pull it out, and go, you got to read this book, man. And this is going to tell you how to do it. Because realistically, for anybody listening, I'll tell you right now how to be a millionaire. You want to be a millionaire? I'll tell you exactly how to do it.
Right.
You find a millionaire, you ask them what they did, and you do exactly what they did.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Toronto Public Library, one of the greatest resources in the city that most people don't know. They do have current books. They have, and even DVDs. Remember DVDs?
And video games too. Video games.
They do? Really?
PS4 games, man.
Just say it because it's amazing.
Yeah.
Get reacquainted. Go get your card. Just gotta have ID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
So with this kid, we create the blueprint from. Now he's got the manual.
Amazing.
Or he's got the blueprint. He's got somebody who says to him, and not just me. We have to reinforce it at school and kind of with his family and say, all right, listen. You got to remind this guy of these are the steps he needs to take because, unfortunately, and it's a human thing, and I was guilty of it too, is I find we always externalize happiness and peace. It's got to come from somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? And you can stay there forever, but you're never going to get it. You can win the lottery. You're still going to be miserable unless you've really dealt with what you're looking for. Right? Really what you want. Where's the fulfillment coming from? So with these young kids, this being up there, and we all know this, there's so much potential there. And I hate potential because it's such a horrible word, but it's true. There's so much greatness there in some of them, right? And the other ones, they just fall in and out, and that kind of comes into something else. But, there's so much greatness in there. If they just got shifted into the right direction rather than being influenced by other gang members, older gang members who are doing what will happen to them because they know it works and that influencing. They just had that little sidekick where, or a little side push saying, okay, you want to go to the NBA, physically you got it. If you can put the work ethic in now, you can follow these rules, do this, you're going to get there. And I talked to the school, and I've kept in touch with that kid every 2 or 3 weeks just to be like, you good? And he's just like, good. No issues, man, no issues. And that's one case right now, but for every one we have, there's like 30 that we lose. And it's hard to find that. So it's the motivation. Like today, you could be motivated this morning to go to the gym.
Yes.
But then tomorrow morning, you're going to be like, I got to go.
Exactly.
It comes and it goes.
That's
We got to
right.
build a habit of consistency.
That's
and
right.
Chasing it, understanding that everything takes effort. And it comes from you out. It doesn't come into you.
Right.
If you look for programs to fix all your problems, what happens when those programs aren't there, man?
Right.
You collapse.
No, exactly. It can't be held up. It's a framework. It's a blueprint. Help them find a vision.
Yeah.
I know personally, and I know this from some other people, how things changed for them is they had another option.
Yeah.
It was just literally that simple. Another option was presented. They could see through the fog and make sense of what it was. And whether it's like cooking, I like to cook.
Yeah.
Or you know what? I like to cut hair. I'm going to be a barber.
Yeah.
And it's just something other than, because is the gang life a natural life? Does anyone at the core, do they really want that? Do they really want to exist that way? Because it is under, you sign up and you subscribe to a life of fear. You live in fear and you perpetuate fear. That's what it is. It's guised as power.
Yep.
It's not power. I know it's not power because, when someone has to leave their house and they have to be armed, it's not because of their power. It's because they're in fear of their own life.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yes.
And there's a big attachment to control as well.
Yeah.
And the word control, it means very different things. Like for some of them that we deal with, and a lot of people, they if I were to ask you to define control, some people would say it's like physical control. Like I can do this, I can do that, and if somebody says something to me, I can take care of it. Well, that's actually the opposite of control. That's a lack of control. It's a loss of control. Real control is saying, all right, I'm going to listen to that inner voice that says, do this and don't do that, and I'm going to stay calm and cool and collected. I'm going to make smart, intelligent, strategic choices.
Exactly.
That's absolute control. So with these kids, I feel like
Internal,
they need us to
not
be
an
in control.
ability to externalize it. Yeah.
Well, once your external world doesn't influence your internal, you're in control.
Yes, very true.
Right, you're in control. So it's really echoing that with both their parents, their kids, and for us on the police end of it, there's a lot of hope too, and I'll tell you where the hope comes from. There was a study done of a gang in Los Angeles, 300 gang members. And when they broke it down, they realized that 10% of the gang, or only 30 members, were responsible for everyday criminal decision-making. So they were the ones doing the shootings, the killings, the drug dealing, the dope, organizing for young kids to be recruited in, doing the sex trafficking. They were 10%, 30 people. The other 270, the 90%, had an average gang membership span of 2 years. So they were in and out within 2 years.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
A revolving door.
Revolving door, that 90%. So that 90%, generally by the age of 21, they were out, right? And they were only in for an average of 2 years. And they all left for different reasons. It was, they got into school, they
Military.
moved, they found a girlfriend,
Right.
military, they
Yeah.
found a boyfriend,
Right.
They got shot, or they were a victim of crime, or their friend got killed, and they said, man, this is not for me.
Spooked out, whatever.
And in all of those cases, when it was personally motivated, none of them faced any internal repercussion. The only time internal violence happened was when there was an optic that they were an informant for the police, or that they had done something wrong to somebody else.
Right.
Right? And those are just optics. They
Made
don't
an
even know if it's
example.
true or not.
Yeah.
Then they set an example of those guys. So with us, again, our gang prevention strategy was, Okay, that 10%, we need to hold them accountable. We need to know who they are because they need to be kept in custody. We can't have people that are 17, 18 years old recruiting 11, 12, 13-year-olds into gangs.
Yeah.
Can't have those people abducting other people or, drugging or forcing girls into human trafficking. Can't have it. That cannot be tolerated. That side is where we focus on as police, right? But the other side is that 90%, if we can identify them and we can shorten that 2 years to 1 year to 6 months, that's where we're going to have our success. So our focus on the prevention end is that 90%, but we still need to have that hard enforcement end to do things to get the guns off of the street.
Yes.
Right.
So it's a balancing
both.
act, man.
Yeah.
It's
wow.
I find in a lot of these type of spaces and conversations, especially as a police officer, when we talk about arresting people, because we arrest people and then we hear the backstory on that person.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, this good kid made a bad decision. Yeah, potentially, 100%. The decision still happened.
Right.
It still occurred. So yeah, there's something else which we're going to look into now, deep rooted, but we still need to hold these people accountable for it. And a lot of the arguments that I find, sometimes we'll get into, are disagreements, I'll say for nice words, are disagreements on what is the best solution, which is so crazy to me. Do everything.
Right.
Do everything. So
That's
if somebody
right.
says, what's better, this one or that one? We should do this one over that one.
Yeah.
Why? Do both.
Right.
Do both. It's not
That's
a big
right.
deal.
Do
That's right.
everything that's good.
Do everything.
Yeah.
So with us, we ask, what do? We do everything. And because we don't know what's going to work for what person.
Can I ask you?
Yeah, man.
I'm a part of the community. I'm a teacher. I'm a parent. I have a business in the area. Whatever. The circle of gangs is somehow reverberated in my life. What can that person do? And if they're not, I'm just gonna call the cops or Crime Stoppers. Like, literally, if they were there, if you had the ear of a community that says, like, we don't want this anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, but we know some of this problem is our sons or this lady's nephew or whatever. What can they do?
Oh man, honestly, I wouldn't even know where to answer that. But the good side to that is I know who to call, and that's the point of partnerships and networks and integrated people. Is as the police, I can give you an answer as a police officer from our lens what would happen. And for our lens, it would be like find your community leaders, incorporate us into there, but really let the community police itself. We'll give you the resources, the support, but you guys do. But does that solve ultimately the problem? It might potentially displace it to another neighborhood. It might isolate it. It might make it worse. It might create more distrust. We don't know, but I can tell you from the police end. But to give you an end for what the end goal is, I don't know. We have to incorporate everybody in there and really drive that solution from the community. It's got to come from within. So it'd be more of having a conversation with the community. Let's say you were that labor and you called me up and you said, listen, Ron, I got an issue right now. I'd meet with you first. And I'd be like, all right, you tell me what the issue is that you see. And let's compare here. And let's just say, okay, this is what we see in the police activity. You're filling in some gaps for me. And I realize, oh, wait a minute. You got community housing here. You got some mental illness here. There's a school across the street. There's no equitable development. I know 4 other people we need to call to bring them to this table.
Yeah, amazing.
Right,
It's
and now
people.
we need to fill
it
this
goes
gap.
back to you need to connect people. There's no just program. You can say, hey guys, I'll get this brochure. I'll watch this PowerPoint. Now you're versed. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll say this, man. You're the real deal.
Thanks, man. I
You
appreciate
you
it.
are
It's
very
so good.
very passionate.
I am, yeah.
And the unit that you're in, man. If there's more people like you,
There are.
and to me, the difference is going to be made, and it has to start. It has to start. Like we're talking about genuineness, that oozes from you, man.
Oh, thank you, man.
And to me, I'm just like proud to know
so
that there's
thank you.
representation like that. And I really, really want to thank you, man, for coming on the
No
show
worries,
today,
man.
man. I mean, I think people are going to listen to this and have also a different view as well on
Yeah.
basically, how they could, approach something.
Yeah.
If someone is listening to this right now that is, looking at maybe getting that help, that reach out, is there anything at all you can throw it right now?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is @TorontoCop. Simple, straight up. I can't believe I got it, but I got it.
It's so good.
You can also email at gangprevention, all one word, @torontopolice.owen.ca.
Okay.
Or give a call to our office. It's 416-808-2320. I'm there Monday to Friday during the day. Somebody will answer. If not, leave a message.
Okay.
And we'll get back to you, man, and then we can take it from there. I'd love to be able to tell you we have a solution. We don't.
Okay.
Right now,
Right.
but we have solutions, and we're going to work with everybody to figure this out, and we might see the dividend of this in 10 to 15 years, but at least we're starting here today. And I should end off saying I'm lucky to be the person talking to you in the face to this, but there are hundreds of other people involved in it in the Toronto Police that are all as passionate as I am about it. and they're there, but I just get lucky to be the handsome guy that gets to come out and talk to everybody.
There you go, man.
Yeah,
you
no,
so
it's
much.
a pleasure, man. It's so amazing.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I have a buddy who went to Missouri, I think, and there was a juvenile detention center that was doing something, and it's getting the world's attention. And essentially, if anyone acted up in this juvie hall, none of the authorities made it their problem.
Yeah.
It was self-governed.
Yep.
Okay, and if some guy was mad, he would be surrounded by the other inmates. Okay, and they'd ask him, "What happened?" Okay, and they would just talk.
Yeah.
And they literally would use their power as a collective, as a group, as a gang, to start dialogue, because they were outnumbered in the sense of opinion. Okay, and they were able to work through some crazy problems that you can imagine in there through just words.
Words matter.
And when they found that they could actually exercise this language of words, then what they would normally do if they would stab or shoot or strangle or whatever, and this was some violent crime that these kids had committed, they now knew that they had another option in order to work things out. Okay, I'm gonna try to get you that stuff, the information,
please,
specifically, because there was some stuff that's just scratching the surface of it. There was some. These guys are directly inside of it, where you have all these opposing gang members all under one roof.
Nice.
And they found a way to have that became their tribe. They actually, there's some amazing stuff that's happening there. So hopefully there's some things we can take away from that. I'd say this, I don't know, I hope we could do this next week or next month or something. Like, if you were just scratching the surface 2 years ago to start this, I would love to just continually hear what you're doing.
Yeah, anytime. Call me up, man. I'll make myself available. I'll pop in. I'll give you some updates. I'll give some cool stories and some big things hopefully down the road.
Yeah, I think more people need to hear about this. They definitely do. And it's not like, how do I say this? It's not that, well, that's a problem there.
That's everywhere.
Yeah. That whole thing. To me, that's such a scapegoat. It's such a cop-out in a way, just to think that's like in that part of the neighborhood. And it's so easy to just take your wonderful air-conditioned SUV and drive it right into your garage and close it and never talk to your neighbors and live a life of Netflix and Amazon. And you know what I'm saying? Like, there's nothing more rewarding in life, I think, than getting into the problems of other people's lives. Because if you make, I assume you've made great sacrifice to do what you're doing.
But I'm okay with it.
But I'm saying that there's great reward.
Yeah.
It comes out of it, right? If you don't go in there, then you'll never see or have a potential that's these great things that can happen. I've been to funerals for young kids, but I've also been to graduations, and a little birthday party for the little baby that's born, and it's just like, that's real life. There's no way, and for some reason we are surprised, I think, by the ups and downs of real life in our society, because we're so into entertainment, into things that amuse us. You know what I mean?
1,000,000%, man.
Yeah. So I appreciate you that you have a pulse in the real heartbeat of life.
Thanks, bro.
The good and the bad.
Yes.
Always, man.
Yeah, man. It's
Thanks
amazing.
very much, man.
No worries,
Appreciate
guys.
it, man.
Thank you
Awesome,
so much, man.
Thanks,
I'll
buddy.
come back whenever you guys want.
Yeah,
Rob
for
and
sure, buddy.
duplicate.
All right.
All
All right, awesome. That's
Thanks,
right.
guys.
Thanks, dude.
Listen to this episode on iTunes and Spotify. Make sure to drop by next week. And don't forget to subscribe.
Let's go!
It's time to give a shout out to our sponsors. This podcast is brought to you by Sentinel Security Plus. For all your premium security needs, visit SentinelSecurityPlus.com.
And The Substance Group for all your integrated marketing solutions. Visit TheSubstanceGroup.com.